Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you this morning. We are in the third week of our series in the first part of the book of Revelation. And we're looking at 7 letters that were sent to 7 different churches. These letters were written out by the Apostle John, but they were dictated to him by Jesus himself while John was in exile for his faith on the island of Patmos. And though each letter was addressed to a specific church in Asia Minor, all of them were intended to be read at every church and to apply to every church wherever they fit. And the same would be true for us as we read them, is to look and see how they fit our church, our life, our walk with Christ. Each of them was a bit of a diagnostic on the church that was being addressed. So there would be some comments from Jesus about what's going well, what was praiseworthy in that church. And then there would be some comments about some course corrections, some things that they needed to change. The letters appear to be organized, at least, in the order that they would be delivered. So if you look at the map, the letters came via courier to the port city of Ephesus. Then it went a little bit away to Smyrna, which Darren talked about last week. And now this week we've moved 40 miles to the north and 10 miles inland to the city of Pergamum. Pergamum was this large, impressive city in the Roman Empire. It was roughly 200,000 people who lived in the city. It was built on a hill up over the valley. It sat 800 to 1,000 feet above the valley below. It created this formidable presence in this indefeatable fortress on this hillside. And there were 3 primary things that the city and the people of Pergamum were known for. The first is that well-educated people lived there and traveled there. Pergamum was this intellectual city at some level. It was home to the second largest library in the known world, second only to the library that was in Alexandria, Egypt. It had more than 200,000 books in it. Now, they weren't books like you and I think, with a binding and they fit on a shelf neatly. They were written on scrolls of parchment or papyrus that were then rolled up. So 200,000 of these scrolls organized in this library. It was an impressive achievement, so much so that history tells us that Mark Antony, the Roman general, gave that library as a gift to his bride Cleopatra. Pergamum was secondly known for her political power. By the time that John would write this letter, Pergamum had exceeded every other city in the region and was now considered the capital city for Rome in Asia Minor. And since Rome was a theocracy, it was not only the political center, but it was the theological center of the region. And it was the home of emperor worship, which we'll talk about a little bit later this morning. Specifically there, they had 3 temples dedicated to Roman emperors as gods, 2 who were deceased, and the current emperor had a temple there, Domitian. Pergamum was lastly known for its wide variety of belief systems that it accommodated. In addition to the 3 temples of Caesar that were in the city, there were also temples to the Greek gods, Zeus, Athena, Dionysius, and others. And there were other various pagan religions that were in that city covering the city. So they tolerated a lot of different beliefs. Officials there really didn't care what your worldview was. You got to pick your own beliefs. You could sprinkle in your religious beliefs and your political ideals and your sacred values and your philosophical ideals and come up with kind of your own unique blend of faith, customized to your liking. You could do that with one caveat. Caesar had to be at the center. Caesar must get your worship. Worship him as the highest religious authority. Worship him as the highest political authority. And to prove your loyalty was still present, once a year you had to visit Domitian's temple. You had to walk through and sprinkle some incense on the altar to Domitian. And you had to say the words loud enough for everyone to hear, Caesar is Lord. It was a melting pot, and yet the leaders in Pergamum were not completely tolerant. They had a strong intolerance, in fact, for any religion that claimed itself to be exclusive. And so Jesus' words didn't sit well there. I am the way, I am the truth. I am the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. If you refuse to compromise with the imperial cult, you could lose your life. If you refuse to cooperate and accommodate the pagan cults that were in the town, you could lose your livelihood because they controlled all the trade guilds in the city. Every day, Christians in Pergamum faced tough choices. And if we're honest in our walk with Christ, we're going to face some of them too. What does my faith allow me to embrace in my culture? What does my faith require me to reject in the culture? Who or what is really at the center of my worldview? And is that choice a choice worth dying for? All right, so I'm going to walk us through this morning Revelation chapter 2, verses 12 through 17. And I'm going to do it just a couple of verses at a time because there are some cultural and historical references there that unless we talk about them, this is not going to make a whole lot of sense, you know? And I don't want you to ever walk out of a service on a Sunday morning going, he sounded a lot like Charlie Brown's teacher, you know? Wah, 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 wah. I don't understand him, but okay. All right, so, and I'm not going to be able to thoroughly unpack each one, so I would encourage you to dig through the passages I reference and search them out for yourself. And I want to talk about them with you because they help us understand this letter that Jesus sent to the church in Pergamum. So here we go. To the angel of the church in Pergamum write, these are the words of him who has the sharp, double-edged sword. I know where you live. Sounds a little stalkerish, doesn't it? I know where you live, where Satan has his throne. That's not a great statement, right? That is not a desirable address. Those people were the only people who could say literally they had the neighbor from hell, right? Satan lives in that city and has his throne there. It's a scary word picture that John uses here. He's saying Satan is super comfortable in Pergamum. He's comfortable in your culture. He's comfortable in your emperor worship. He's comfortable with your polytheism. There is really nothing in the city of Pergamum to challenge his authority. Nothing to stop his influence from spreading. He is so comfortable there, likes it so much there, he's made it his throne and his place of power. There is a lot of comfort in that. When those people would hear those words, to know that Jesus thoroughly understands their situation. So he says to them, hey, I know what your life is like. I know how challenging it can be to have a strong faith there, and yet you remain true to my name. You didn't renounce your faith in me, not even in the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was put to death in your city. And again he says, where Satan lives. Antipas was one of those leaders of the church in Pergamum. In fact, he was the key leader. He and John were friends. John had actually selected him to lead the church there. When Jesus says the days of Antipas, those are not good days. It was synonymous for the people who heard it with the beginning of heavy persecution of Christians in Pergamum by Domitian. When Christianity's influence began to grow in the region, what happened was that all of the leaders of the false religions at the pagan temples went on the attack, and Antipas was their first and most famous target. According to historical documents, I love this, Antipas cast so many demons out of people and out of the city. He had cast out so many demons that the demons themselves came to the pagan priests and began to complain, hey, you've got to do something about Antipas. How cool is that, right? So the priests of the pagan temples went to the governor of Pergamum and complained and just said, look, with all these evil spirits being thrown out of the city by Antipas, it's really tough for us to worship our gods here. They were claiming religious persecution to the governor of Pergamum. That's awesome. The governor of Pergamum then devised a punishment for Antipas. He had to go, we mentioned earlier, the temples to the emperors. He had to go to the temple for Domitian, and on the altar, he had to make a sacrifice of wine and incense. And he had to declare that the emperor and the emperor alone was Lord and God. How do you think that went for Antipas? I mean, we know the end of the story, so we know it didn't go really well for him. He refused. And by that simple act, he not only denied the divinity of the emperor, he denied Rome's authority in the region. He was guilty of treason. Because of that, he was sentenced to death. He would be martyred on the altar of Zeus. Now, the altar of Zeus was at one of the highest pinnacles in the city. It was this massive building, which coincidentally is still in existence. It's been excavated in the 1800s. It was brought to the city of Berlin and is on permanent display there. All of the colonnades, all of the entries and the beautiful engravings in marble are preserved, and then the altar of Zeus is there as well, and it sits 40 feet in height above the rest of the building. It was 100 feet square. And on top of it sat a brazen bull, a hollow brazen bull. It was one of the worst torture devices ever created. They would take the bull, the top off of the bull, and would bind the victim, place him inside, put the top back on, seal it, and then build a fire underneath it. They had somehow created, and I don't fully understand the physics of this, but they had created pipes within the head of the bull so that as the person screamed in agony, the screams were converted into snorts and grunts that a bull would make. And that's what you heard as Antipas was martyred. Made the bull seem like it was coming to life to the people and verified their worship of Zeus. To these Christians who witnessed the slow, agonizing death of their leader, Jesus says, I know where you live. I know that even in that difficult time, you've held on to your faith. When the elder statesman of your church was martyred, you did not abandon your faith. And that's really high praise. And then Jesus says, the word nobody wants to hear, nevertheless, I have a few things against you. Now, if you've been with us for the first two messages in this series, you know that there's kind of this pattern that's starting to emerge in the letters that Jesus sent to the churches. They'll begin with praise. Here are some things you're doing well. Here are the things I love about you. And then there's going to be a but or a however or a nevertheless in there, which bridges us to the middle part of the letter, which says, here's some things you need to do better in. Here's where you need to improve. And this is that middle painful part. Jesus says, there are some among you who hold to the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to entice the Israelites to sin so that they ate food sacrificed to idols and committed sexual immorality. Likewise, you also have those who hold to the teaching of the Nicolaitans. Now, that doesn't make any sense if you don't know who Balaam and Balak and the Nicolaitans are. And if you don't know them, Balaam and Balak, at least, are found in the book of Numbers. That may be why you don't know them. Book of Numbers is a tough read, but this is a great story in chapter 22 of Numbers about these two individuals. Balak was the king of Moab. It was a country that resided in what we now know as the region of Jordan in the Middle East. The Israelite army was advancing against Moab, preparing to attack that nation. And so Balak sends a ridiculous amount of money with some couriers to this prophet named Balaam. And he says to Balaam, this money is yours if you'll put a curse on the Israelites so I can defeat them. Now, Balak really didn't understand how the whole prophet thing worked, but he was taking his best shot to get victory in battle. Not wanting to lose this huge amount of money that's sitting right in front of him, Balaam offers Balak some wisdom. He says, not really how this works. I can't do what you're asking me to do, but I do have some insider information. God protects and blesses the Israelites. That's why they're so victorious in battle. And unless that blessing goes away, you are not going to defeat them. However, that blessing, God has told them, is contingent on their obedience to his commands. So, you don't really have to defeat them in battle, Balak. You just have to get them to compromise their faith. And when they compromise their faith, God will remove his blessing. And when God removes his blessing, you can wipe them out easily. Now, kudos to Balaam for figuring all of this out, right? For seeing these cyclical patterns in the nation of Israel of strong faith and following God and falling away from God and not following him and crying out to help and following him again. He gave this wisdom to Balak, and Balak obeyed and followed the wisdom, and the Israelites disobeyed God. They started marrying Moabite women who turned their hearts towards the false gods and caused them to do things that God had said don't do. And so God removed his protection, and they suffered horrible consequences as a nation. Now, that's all that backstory to John writing, there are some among you who hold to the teachings of Balaam. That phrase, the teachings of Balaam, had become synonymous in the culture. It was a tag put on anybody who followed a false prophet that led them to compromise their faith. That's what John is saying here. You've got people among you who are causing you to disobey God, and you're tolerant of them. Just like the false teacher Balaam was tolerated in that day. And these false teachers in your region are leading you to compromise your faith. Now, we don't know much about the Nicolaitans. In fact, Darren talked about the little bit we do know in a message a couple of weeks ago. But what we know is that their influence on the church in Pergamum was similar to this teachings of Balaam tag. They were seeding the people with sneaky little lies. You really don't have to die like Antipas did. You don't have to give up your faith. You just have to relax your standards a bit. We all know that you really worship God. You don't worship Domitian, but what harm is there in once a year walking in the temple and sprinkling a little dust and going, Caesar is Lord, see you next year? I mean, really, how bad is that? I could take a survey this morning. I could talk to each one of you as you leave and ask you the simple question, is it in your plans for this week to compromise your faith? Are you planning as you sit here right now to do something you know you shouldn't do this week? And I would guess probably all of you but one would say absolutely not. And I only say all but one because now I want you to think about the people around you. We'd say absolutely not. There's no way I'm going to compromise my faith. That is not in the plan for this week. It's not one of my top 5 goals for the week. But we will all find ourselves in situations this week where we're tempted to compromise. Just a little. Maybe a tiny little thing, or it might be a big thing. And we're tempted to give in. Let me give you an example from their culture. One of the pagan temples that was in town was a temple set up to the Greek god of healing and medicine. It was the temple of Asclepius. And the building, actually the majority of the building and most of the treatment was underground. And if you went to that underground area, as you walked in, you would be given a sedative to drink. Go a little further, and you'd see why you needed the sedative. Because you'd walk into a room that was filled with snakes. Gosh, I thought you'd like that better than that. And here's what happened. You took the sedative. You laid down on the floor. None of these snakes were poisonous. It doesn't really matter, though, does it? Really? You'd lay down on the floor and you'd go to sleep. And the temple guardians said, if a snake crawled over you in your sleep, it meant you were going to be healed. Personal note here. If a snake crawled over me while I'm sleeping, I'm not the only thing that's going to need healing. So you would lay there and you would hope that a snake would crawl over you so that you could be healed. Now, we hear that and we go, that's ridiculous, right? That's a crazy thing. That's not going to work. Why would you try that? Those are easy judgments to make when we're healthy. What if we get sick? What if we stay sick? What if it's not you that gets sick, but it's your child, your grandchild? What if it's your spouse, your parent? How crazy would we get to try to save them? Where would we put our trust? What's really too far out there to do to save someone's life? In some settings, compromise can appear to be the logical choice. Sometimes we just don't have all the knowledge we need. Nobody ever went into the temple of Asclepius who was on the verge of death. In fact, that wasn't allowed. There was a sign above that entrance, below ground, but above the entrance to the room with all the snakes, and said, "The dying are not allowed in here." So it really wasn't a temple of healing like it claimed to be. But it seems like a logical choice. Sometimes our information is not complete when we make our decisions to compromise or not. Ultimately, what Jesus is saying here, he's asking the question, how strong is our faith in him? In reality, through the years, I've come to realize that being a strong Christian includes the idea of me seeing more and more of my weaknesses and my propensity to sin. That's not a weakness, that's a strength. Knowing the facts about myself. The strong Christian to me is the one who knows that any faith can be shaken. Even the most mature Christian can go into deserts of doubt and struggle. So what do we need when we're in that struggle, when we're tempted to compromise our faith? What is it that's going to help us stand firm? I'll give you a couple of things. One, I think we need to make sure that the faith we're standing on is solid. Sometimes our faith gives way because we haven't really fully owned it. We haven't fully invested in it. We don't fully understand why we believe or even what we believe. We just believe. I love 1 Timothy 4:7 out of the Phillips translation. Paul says to this young man, Timothy, you need to take the time and trouble to keep yourself spiritually fit. Isn't that beautiful? Puts it in accessible language for us. And it begs the question, how much time and energy do we invest into our relationship with God? I know we binge watch Netflix. I do it too. You ever binge read an entire book of the Bible? How much time do we spend in prayer where God has our full attention? What's the investment that we're making in developing a faith that will give us a place to stand when we're tested? And I can promise you this morning, if the only thing you do as a result of this is you begin to read your Bible and pray on a regular basis, your faith will skyrocket. So we need to make sure that what we're standing on is solid, and we also need a group of people to stand there with us. We need a community around us that's real and honest and loving. A community, I need to be, and you do too, in a community where people know our story. They know the times that our faith has been tested and it's survived. They know the times that our faith has been tested and we've been tempted to give up. But we hung in there, and they know the times when we've compromised our faith. Times we folded under pressure and later wished we hadn't done that. We need a community of faith in our lives that can hold us up when all our strength is gone. A community that will walk with us, not try to fix us, where we can be honest and authentic about how crappy it feels when we're in the middle of that desert. And they're not going to try to solve it for us. They're just going to be with us. I've been a part of community groups like that for 35 years. Not the same one. There have been a dozen or more groups that I've been in over those 35 years. I've been in 3 in the time that I've been here at Westridge. 3 different groups. And I can tell you honestly, from the depths of my heart, I don't know where my faith would be today if it weren't for those groups who walked with me. And I don't know where some of them would be if we hadn't walked with them. And I think you're going to get tired of me saying this over and over again. You're going to get tired of me saying it before I get tired of saying it. We need to be in a group, a community group. Have people around us if we're going to make it through this life with our faith intact. And you might find that in a community group that meets in a home. You might find it in a Bible study here at the church. You might find it in a serving group that you hang out with, and while you're serving, you just talk about life. But we need community, and the time to build it is now. Especially if you don't feel like you need it right now. That's the time to build it. Because I can tell you, when the storms hit and you need it, it's really tough to jump into a group at that point. We'll help you, but it's just not the same. The community you build now is an investment in your future faith. One of the things that is hard for me with these letters that Jesus sent is he can be pretty blunt, almost brutal with his words. I don't know if you've read the words there and you feel that way, but it's hit me that way. With everything that's going on with these people in Pergamum, Jesus now gets really blunt as he wraps up his letter to them. And he says, repent, therefore. In light of everything I've said, you've got some changes to make in your life. Otherwise, I'm going to come to you soon, and I'll fight against those people who are weakening your faith with the sword of my mouth, which was just a symbol all throughout Revelation for the truth of Jesus. I hear those 2 words, repent, therefore. I hear them in my mom's voice, right? I hear her saying, hey, you guys better straighten up. Don't make me come down there, right? That's kind of the tone I hear in this from Jesus. When Jesus gives us a course correction, it's generally very brief, very direct, bordering on blunt. When his Holy Spirit whispers to us, we need to wake up, and we need to listen, and we need to take action. Take action if we're drifting or we're compromising, if we're going down the wrong path, if we're making bad choices in our life, if our lifestyle and our actions and our words are not leading us to greater levels of love and devotion to God, they're not helping us embrace and encounter and embody his amazing grace to us. If they're not accomplishing that, then we need to repent. We need to change our life, change our thinking. And I'll give you that that's not easy. But it's also not impossible. If we do, if we strengthen our faith, if we weather the storms of this life, here is Jesus' promise to us. It says, whoever has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To the one who is victorious, Jesus says. To the one who runs the full race, who doesn't quit, who hangs in there when it's tough to follow our faith. Hangs in there when it's not easy. To the one who is not perfect, but to the one who's victorious. I will give some of the hidden manna. It's an Old Testament symbol for God's love and provision and grace in our lives. It's Jesus basically saying, I'm going to take care of you. I'm not going to let you go. I won't. And I will also give that person a white stone with a new name written on it, known only to the one who receives it. I don't know about you, but sometimes I read things in the Bible and I just go, what in the world? Right? That's one of them. And until this week, I had no idea the beautiful imagery behind it. A white stone. In Rome, the sports heroes were the gladiators. And they were heroes admired by everyone. A lot of them were killed in their battles. But if you lived to be an old man or an old woman, yes, there were female gladiators, you were allowed to retire in honor. And after your final battle, you would be given a tessera. this little white stone, something like the one that's on the screen, probably about the size of a $50. A white stone with an insignia on it. And that symbol represented the fact that your valor had been proven beyond a doubt. When you received that stone, it meant there were no more battles for you to fight. Your fighting days are done. You've won your retirement. You've won the admiration of the crowd. And that stone allows you for the very first time to go into the banquet after the gladiator games that only the people who held that stone could go to. It was your admission ticket to the great banquet. With these simple images and words, Jesus assures us He knows every detail of your life. He knows what you're struggling with right now. He knows what you gave into yesterday. He knows what's going to happen in your life tomorrow. He knows where we live and the struggles we have. He knows the moments we've held tight to our faith and we've done well. And He knows when we've not done so well. He knows when our faith has been eroded. He knows where it's been diluted in our life to the point where it has little impact on our behavior. And the challenge in all of this, in all the normal stuff of life, is just to stand firm, to stay strong, to hang together, to make it through this life with our faith intact. Jesus says, if you do that, I'll be there to greet you when you retire from life's battles. And I've got a stone I'm going to hand you that is your ticket to the greatest celebration banquet that's ever been given. And on that stone, there's going to be a brand new name given to you. A name that only Jesus and you will know. A name He's chosen for you. Jesus, someone who knows you better than you know yourself. It's a name with a special meaning that only the two of you will understand. That name will let you know in one glance that He's seen every step of your journey. He's been walking with you and sometimes carrying you. He's seen it all. That stone says, wherever you failed, you are covered. And I'm so proud of you because you stood firm in your faith. And in that moment, that white stone in hand, you will know that all the struggles have been worth it.